construction post Whipple's, if you consider that making a pancreaticojejunostomy goes by various techniques and a surgeon has to adapt to one technique, the most favored one is usually the duct to mucosa, and out amongst them, it is, if this is considered to be the pancreatic remnant stump, and if this is considered to be the pancreatic duct, the first layer of the stitches are usually done. So that means if this is this layer between the posterior part of the duct and this layer, this is usually the layer 1 that is done between the two stitch or the pancreas and the loop of the bowel. Thereafter, an enterotomy is created measuring the same size, and the second layer will be exactly into this dimension, which is taken with interrupted 5-OPDS sutures. Now, the needle in this layer 2 will usually be needed to be in this shape so that the job becomes easier. The third layer, which will be anteriorly placed, will be the third layer, again by the same technique as the second layer, whereas the fourth layer is not so well appreciated, is just an covering suture which brings into this part of the bowel with the jejunum. So if you talk about the basic principle of making a duct to the mucosa anastomosis goes by this. There can be multiple variations in this technique that you can do, but it is always better to follow one step or one technique at a time. Post Whipple's, how will you do the hepaticojejunostomy reconstruction? Now, hepaticojejunostomy is technically said to be much easier than the pancreaticojejunostomy, and particularly if the bile duct is pretty dilated, then it becomes much easier. What is always advisable is that the loop of the jejunum, remember, it is usually that the loop of the jejunum will always have the pancreatic anastomosis that is done first. So it is usually the PJ which is usually made first, as it is the most difficult one. Whenever we concentrate on the jejunum, then it is usually in the single line that the exact nature of this part of the bowel is done, and interrupted stitches, a few anchoring may be given which are not important. So the first layer can be some outer seromuscular layer between the jejunum and the posterior layer of the bile duct, which is may or may not be given. Some people do not consider them essential. The second layer is usually with a PDS that you go by the two angle stitches, as you have seen, and then it is the layer 2 that is usually given, which is usually interrupted. Sutures are inserted first and then they are tied, and ultimately when you have done that with the posterior layer, like you have done the anterior layers, you need to now give the layer 3. Again, as I have said, sutures are inserted first, they are held, and then they are tied at the end. So these are usually on 3 layers. You don't need a 4th layer for doing a hepaticojejunostomy. It will be rarely a need for you to stent this anastomosis using a T-tube or otherwise, because this is usually, as I've said, a dilated bile duct. So this is how we do a post-Whipple's hepaticojejunostomy. Considering a post-Whipple's gastrojejunostomy, in a post-Whipple's gastrojejunostomy, the basic idea is about making an anastomosis with the gastric stump, and after you have done the pancreaticojejunostomy and the hepaticojejunostomy, then if this is made at a distance of 15 centimeter, this distance is usually at the 40th centimeter, with the direction of peristalsis being this direction for doing this. The anastomosis is done usually in 4 layers. What is usually done as a practice is that the end of the stomach or the duodenum is stapled, a new enterotomy is done, and as with all gastrojejunostomies, if this is a loop of jejunum that is coming, it is usually a side-to-side anticolic, because it is known to decrease the chances of a delayed gastric emptying. Anterior wall, some people can do it in the posterior wall also, with a lumen size of approximately 6 to 8 centimeters is usually done with a blue cartridge. If you are doing it hand sewn, then you are required to do it in 4 layers. So it is usually the end of the stomach that is closed, and the site of the jejunum is usually done in an anticolic anterior wall with a lumen of 6 to 8 in this. The suture that we will be using is a forovicryl suture or a foropds suture for doing this operation.